pages 223 to 283 in Anne Frank. It's actually the final pages, and it includes the afterword at the end, which explains what happened to Anne and her family and the other annex residents. So we will be going through a lot of that information in today's guided reading. What I want you to do is open up today's 328 daily checkpoint, and I want you to complete it as you listen. So do that now, go into your LAC 1 course, and have that open as we go through the lesson. So in today's reading, what I want you to look for is really just how the 2 years in the annex have affected the residents. The reaction to D-Day, we will talk about what that is, and then we'll talk about how the annex residents really reacted to it, and then what happened to Anne and her family, as well as the other annex residents in the afterword of the text. So we have 2 vocabulary words. With these vocabulary words, they're actually the first 2 checkpoint questions. So just make sure you're paying attention. The first vocabulary word is contradiction. Contradiction Anne mentions in one of the excerpts from her diary that we will be reading today, and it means the act of saying something that is opposite or very different in meaning to something else, or a difference or disagreement between 2 things, which means that both cannot be true. So you will see that Anne says she does contradict herself. She uses the word contradiction. So that is our definition there, taken from the Merriam-Webster Dictionary. And then the other word, you may have actually heard of it in history class. It is D-Day. It's not necessarily a vocabulary word, but it's really a part of history that you should understand as you actually go ahead and read this part of the diary. On June 6, 1944, so during World War II, the Allied troops, so Americans, British, Canadians, they stormed the beaches of Normandy, France, and engaged the German army there. Basically, they were there to begin overtaking the Nazi regime. But they did land on a 50-mile stretch of a heavily fortified French coastline to fight Nazi Germany. So it was at this point that you will see the annex residents have hope that possibly they will be freed soon. So we will talk about that as we get to that excerpt in Anne's diary. So go ahead, stop the recording, and go ahead and answer these questions, questions 1 and 2, in the checkpoint. Before we start, I want you to think about a prediction. Some of you may already know what happens to Anne. I know we've discussed it a little bit, but really prediction, or just kind of think about what happens to Anne, her family, and the rest of the annex residents. As I said, we will discuss that toward the end of this guided reading lesson. Okay, so the guided reading today is actually screenshots pulled directly from the text you have at home. So if you would like, if it's clearer to read, you can have your books open. I will have all of the dates of the diary entries at the top of the page, so you can take a look there. We're actually going to start, I believe it starts on page 223. It's Wednesday, May 3rd, 1944. This is the first entry Anne has after the last set of readings that we did. In this entry, you will see Anne's maturity, the fact that she has a good grasp on what is going on with the war, We see a ton of insight and depth of her thoughts. You're going to see her use words like despairingly, downcast. I think she uses despair more than once. Yet she says at the end that she regards our hiding as a dangerous adventure. Okay, so once again, you see, even though she's been in hiding for 2 years, she's really trying to keep that positivity, even though she does understand everything that's going on around her. Dear Kitty, first, just the news of the week. We're having a holiday from politics. There is nothing, absolutely nothing to announce. I, too, am gradually beginning to believe that the invasion will come. After all, they can't let the Russians clear up everything. For that matter, they're not doing anything either at the moment. Mr. Kufius comes to the office every morning again now. He's got a new spring for Peter's divan, so Peter will have to do some upholstering, about which, quite understandably, he doesn't feel a bit happy. Have I told you that Bosch has disappeared? Simply vanished. We haven't seen a sign of her since Thursday of last week. I expect she's already in the cat's heaven while some animal lover is enjoying a succulent meal from her. Perhaps some little girl will be given a fur cap out of her skin. Peter is very sad about it. So you just see she's kind of just talking about a few different things that have been going on in the annex. Since Saturday, we've changed over and have had lunch 11:30 in the morning, so we have to last out with 1 cupful of porridge. This saves us a meal. Vegetables are still very difficult to obtain. We had rotten boiled lettuce this afternoon. Ordinary lettuce, spinach, and boiled lettuce. There's nothing else. With these, we eat rotten potatoes, so it's a delicious combination. As you can easily imagine, we often ask ourselves here despairingly, what is the use of the war? Why can't people live peacefully together? Why all this destruction? The question is very understandable, but no one has found a satisfactory answer to it so far. Yes, why do they make still more gigantic planes, still heavier bombs, and at the same time prefabricated houses for reconstruction? Why should millions be spent daily on the war, and yet there's not a penny available for medical services, artists, or for poor people? Why do some people have to starve while there are surpluses rotting in the other parts of the world? Oh, why are people so crazy? I don't believe that the big men, the politicians, and the capitalists alone are guilty of the war. Oh no, the little man is just as guilty. Otherwise, the peoples of the world would have risen in revolt long ago. There's in people simply an urge to destroy, an urge to kill, to murder and rage, and until all mankind, without exception, undergoes a great change, wars will be waged. Everything that has been built up, cultivated, and grown will be destroyed and disfigured, after which mankind will have to begin all over again. I have been downcast, but never in despair. I regard our hiding as a dangerous adventure, romantic and interesting at the same time. In my diary, I treat all the privations as amusing. I have made up my mind now to lead a different life from other girls, and later on different from ordinary housewives. My start has been so very full of interest, and that is the sole reason why I have to laugh at the humorous side of the most dangerous moment. I am young and I possess many buried qualities. I am young and strong and I'm living a great adventure. I'm still in the midst of it and can't grumble the whole day long. I have been given a lot, a happy nature, a great deal of cheerfulness and strength. Every day I feel that I am developing inwardly, that the liberation is drawing nearer, and how beautiful nature is, how good the people are about me, How interesting this adventure is. Why then should I be in despair? Yours, Anne. Again, you see her positivity, you see her insight. She really has a good understanding of what is going on around her. The next excerpt you will see, basically, and in these group of pages, you will see that Anne starts to see Peter as more of a friend. Remember, she had a crush on him for a little while, but she's now back to thinking of him as a friend. Friday, May 19th, 1944. Dear Kitty, I felt rotten yesterday, really out of sorts, unusual for Anne, with tummy ache and every other imaginable misery. I'm much better again today, feeling hungry, but I'd better not touch the kidney beans we're having today. All goes well with Peter and me. The poor boy seems to need a little love even more than I do. He blushes every evening when he gets his goodnight kiss and simply begs for another. I wonder if I'm a good substitute for Bosch. I don't mind. He is so happy now that he knows that someone loves him. You can tell that Anne feels as though Peter really does love her, and she's doing him a service pretty much by letting him feel like she loves him back. But at this point, again, and you'll see in these pages, that she really just does view him as pretty much a friend at this point. After my laborious conquest, I've got the situation a bit more in hand now, but I don't think my love has cooled off. He's a darling, but I soon closed up my inner self from him. If he wants to force the lock again, he'll have to work a good deal harder than before. Yours, Anne. So she's still a little bit interested at this point, but again, you can tell that the friendship is looming there. Monday, May 22nd, 1944. So again, you're going to see the harsh reality of their situation. You see these mature opinions by Anne, really, and these views that she has on the subject. To our great horror and regret, we hear that the attitude of a great many people toward us Jews has changed. We hear that there is anti-Semitism now in circles that never thought of it before. This news has affected us all very, very deeply. The cause of this hatred of the Jews is understandable, even human sometimes, but not good. The Christians blame the Jews for giving secrets away to the Germans, for betraying their helpers, and for the fact that through the Jews, a great many Christians have gone the way of so many others before them and suffered terrible punishment and a dreadful fate. This is all true, but one must always look at these things from both sides. Will Christians behave differently in our place? The Germans have a means of making people talk. Can a person entirely at their mercy, whether Jew or Christian, always remain silent? Look at these questions Anne is posing. Everyone knows that it is practically impossible. Why then should people demand the impossible of the Jews? Oh, it is sad, very sad, that once more, for the umpteenth time, the old truth is confirmed. What one Christian does is his own responsibility. What one Jew does is thrown back at all Jews. Quite honestly, I can't understand that the Dutch, who are such good, honest, upright people, should judge us like this. We, the most oppressed, the unhappiest, perhaps the most pitiful of all peoples of the whole world. I hope one thing only, and that is that this hatred of the Jews will be a passing thing, that the Dutch will show what they are after all, and that they will never totter and lose their sense of right, for anti-Semitism is unjust. And if this terrible threat should actually come true, then the pitiful little collection of Jews that remain will have to leave Holland. We too shall have to move on again with our little bundles and leave this beautiful country which offered us such warm welcome and which now turns its back on us. I love Holland. I who have no native country had hoped that it might become my fatherland, and I still hope it will. Yours, Anne. In this group of pages and these excerpts, you will also see that the annexed residents, along with Anne, are really having a hard time being in hiding right now. It's been 2 years, so they're worn down. They're just really, really frustrated. You know, sometimes they're upset, they're scared. There's just so many emotions. But just imagine, you know, being in hiding for 2 years, and imagine how you would possibly feel. So we have Friday, the 26th of May, 1944. Dear Kitty, at last I can sit quietly at my table in front of a crack of window and write you everything. I feel so miserable. I haven't felt like this for months. Even after the burglary, I didn't feel so utterly broken. On the one hand, the vegetable man, the Jewish question which is being discussed minutely over the whole house, the invasion delay, the bad food, the strain, the miserable atmosphere, my disappointment in Peter. And on the other hand, so she talks about all of these horrible things happening. Then on the other hand, she says, Ellie's engagement with some reception, flowers, Kraler's birthday, fancy cakes, and stories about cabarets, films, and concerts. That difference, that huge difference, is always there. One day we laugh and see the funny side of the situation, but the next we are afraid, fear, suspense, and despair staring from our faces. Miep and Kraler carry the heaviest burden of the 8 in hiding. Miep in all she does, and Kraler through the enormous responsibility, which is sometimes so much for him that he can hardly talk from pent-up nerves and strain. Kufius and Ellie look after us well too, but they can forget us at times, even if it's only for a few hours or a day or even 2 days. They have their own worries. Kufius over his health, Ellie over her engagement, which is not altogether rosy, but they also have their little outings, visits to friends, and the whole life of ordinary people. So that she's talking about the people that are helping them in hiding. For them, the suspense is sometimes lifted, even if it is only for a short time. But for us meaning the annexed residents, it never lifts for a moment. We've been here for 2 years now. How long have we still to put up with this almost unbearable, ever-increasing pressure? So Anne, along with a lot of the other annexed residents, are having a very, very difficult time with the fact that they've been in hiding at this point for 2 years. So this is a continuation of the same excerpt. Again and again, and you will see, what she says here. Again and again, I ask myself, would it not have been better for us all if we had not gone into hiding and if we were dead now and not going through all this misery, especially as we shouldn't be running our protectors into danger anymore. But we all recoil from these thoughts too, for we still love life. We haven't yet forgotten the voice of nature. We still hope about everything. I hope something will happen soon now. Shooting if need be. Nothing can crush us more than this restlessness. Let the end come, even if it is hard. Then at least we shall know whether we are finally going to win through or go under. So pretty powerful stuff from Anne. You know, she's feeling these feelings. It sounds like the annexed residents are feeling the same way. Okay, so now so this last one was from May 26th. We're now June 6th. June 6th, 1944 is D-Day. This is one of the vocabulary terms that I just told you about. So what I want you to focus on for this part of the reading is really, you know, how are the annexed residents reacting? This is D-Day. Came the announcement over the English news, and quite rightly, this is the day. The invasion has begun. The English gave the news at 8 o'clock this morning. Calais, Boulogne, Le Havre, and Cherbourg. Also the Pays du Calais, as usual, were heavily bombarded. Moreover, as a safety measure for all the occupied territories, all people who live within a radius of 35 kilometers from the coast are warned to be prepared for bombardment. If possible, the English will drop pamphlets 1 hour beforehand. According to German news, English parachute troops have landed on the French coast. English landing craft are in battle with the German Navy, says the BBC. We discussed it over the annexed breakfast at 9 o'clock. Is this just a trial landing like deep 2 years ago? English broadcast in German, Dutch, French, and other languages at 10 o'clock. The invasion has begun. That means the real invasion. The English broadcast in German at 11 o'clock, speech by Supreme Commander General Dwight Eisenhower. The English news at 12 o'clock in English. This is D-Day. General Eisenhower said to the French people. Stiff fighting will come now, but after this, the victory. The year 1944 is the year of complete victory. Good luck. English news in English at 1 o'clock. 11,000 planes stand ready and are flying up to and fro, non-stop, landing troops and attacking behind the lines. 4,000 landing boats plus small craft are landing troops and material between Cherbourg and Le Havre incessantly. English and American troops are already engaged in hard fighting. Speeches by Gerbrandy, by the Prime Minister of Belgium, King Haakon of Norway, de Gaulle of France, the King of England, and last but not least, Churchill. Now you will see how Anne and the annex residents react. Great commotion in the secret annex with the long-awaited liberation that has been talked of so much, but which still seems too wonderful, too much like a fairy tale ever come true. Could we be granted victory this year, 1944? We don't know yet, but hope is revived within us. It gives us fresh courage and makes us strong again. Since we must put up bravely with all the fears, privations, and sufferings, the great thing now is to remain calm and steadfast. Now more than ever, we must clench our teeth and not cry out. France, Russia, Italy, and Germany, too, can all cry out and give vent to their misery, but we haven't the right to do that yet. Oh, Kitty, the best part of the invasion is that I have the feeling that friends are approaching. We have been oppressed by those terrible Germans for so long. They have had their knives so at our throats. But the thought of friends and delivery fills us with confidence. Now it doesn't concern the Jews anymore. No, it concerns Holland and all occupied Europe. Perhaps, Margot says, I may yet be able to go back to school in September or October. Yours, Anne. P.S. I'll keep you up to date with all the latest news. So at this point, now just remember that D-Day is the day that the Allies stormed the Normandy beaches of France. They're slowly going to start overcoming the Nazi regime and liberating parts of France and other parts of Europe, and continuing throughout Europe. Okay, so obviously the annexed residents and now has this spark of hope that maybe someday they will be freed from Nazi Germany and the war will end. So now you have this checkpoint question 3, true or false. So answer this in your checkpoint. D-Day inspired hope in Anne and the other Annex residents. True or false? Okay, we're now going to continue. And you will see, and I have this excerpt in here, because you will see the fact that Anne still has this love of nature. There's still this running motif, remember that word? Motif of nature throughout the diary, and she does tend to bring up nature quite a bit here. So Thursday, June 15th, 1944. I wonder if it's because I haven't been able to poke my nose outdoors for so long that I've grown so crazy about everything to do with nature. I can perfectly well remember that there was a time when a deep blue sky, the song of the birds, moonlight and flowers could have never kept me spellbound. That's changed since I've been here. At Whitsun, for instance, when it was so warm, I stayed awake on purpose until 11:30 one evening in order to have a good look at the moon for once by myself. Alas, the sacrifice was all in vain as the moon gave far too much light and I didn't dare risk opening a window another time. Some months ago now, I happened to be upstairs one evening when the window was open. I didn't go downstairs until the window had to be shut. The dark, rainy evening, the gale, the stunning clouds held me entirely in their power. It was the first time in a year and a half I'd seen the night face to face. After that evening, my longing to see it again was greater than my fear of burglars, rats, and raids on the house. I went downstairs all by myself and looked outside through the windows in the kitchen and the private office. A lot of people are fond of nature. Many people sleep outdoors occasionally, and people in prisons and hospitals long for the day when they will be free to enjoy the beauties of nature. But few are so shut away and isolated from that which can be shared alike by rich and poor. It's not imagination on my part when I say that to look up at the sky, the clouds, the moon, and the stars makes me calm and patient. It's a better medicine than either valerian or bromine. Mother Nature makes me humble and prepared to face every blow courageously. Alas, it has had to be that I am only able, except on a few rare occasions, to look at nature through dirty net curtains hanging before very dusty windows. And it's no pleasure looking through these any longer because nature is just the one thing that really must be unadulterated. Yours, Anne. So once again, you just see her yearning to be outside. You know, she just has this strong urge to be outside. Friday, July 21st, 1944. Dear Kitty, now I am getting really hopeful. Now things are going well at last. Yes, really they're going well. Super news. An attempt has been made on Hitler's life, and not even by Jewish communists or English capitalists this time, but by a proud German general. And what's more, he's a count and still quite young. The Fuhrer's life was saved by divine providence, and unfortunately he managed to get off with just a few scratches and burns. A few officers and generals who were with him had been killed and wounded. The chief culprit was shot. Anyway, it certainly shows that there are lots of officers and generals who are sick of the war and would like to see Hitler descend into a bottomless pit. When they've disposed of Hitler, their aim is to establish a military dictator who will make peace with the Allies. Then they intend to rearm and start another war in about 20 years' time. Perhaps the divine power carried on purpose in getting him out of the way, because it would be much easier and more advantageous to the Allies if the impeccable Germans kill each other off. It will make less work for the Russians and the English, and they'll be able to begin rebuilding their own towns all the sooner. Again, you see the fact that Anne knows what is going on politically with the war. She really has this great understanding, and you can hear the hope in this excerpt here. This is Anne's last entry of the diary. Okay, so it is Tuesday, August 1st, 1944. This is where her diary ends. So this is her last entry. And here we see the vocabulary word contradiction. So Anne will talk about that. Little bundle of contradictions. That's how I ended my last letter, and that's how I'm going to begin this one. A little bundle of contradictions. Can you tell me exactly what it is? What does contradiction mean? Like so many words, it can mean two things. Contradiction from without and contradiction from within. The first is the ordinary, not giving in easily, always knowing best, getting in the last word, enfant. All the unpleasant qualities for which I'm renowned. The second, nobody knows about. That's my own secret. I've already told you before that I have, as it were, a dual personality. One half embodies my exuberant cheerfulness, making fun of everything, my high-spiritedness, and above all, the way I take everything lightly. This includes not taking offense at a flirtation, a kiss, an embrace, a dirty joke. This side is usually lying in wait and pushes away the other, which is much better, deeper and purer. You must realize that no one knows Anne's better side, and that's why most people find me so insufferable. It's pretty interesting that Anne is talking about herself in this way, and that this happens to be her last diary entry. Certainly, I'm a giddy clown for one afternoon, but then everyone's had enough of me for another month. Really, it's just the same as a love film is for deep-thinking people. Simply a diversion, amusing just for once, something which is soon forgotten. Not bad, but certainly not good. I loathe having to tell you this, but why shouldn't I, if I know it's true anyway? My lighter, superficial side will always be too quick for the deeper side of me, and that's why it will always win. You can't imagine how often I've already tried to push this Anne away, to cripple her, to hide her, because after all, she's only half of what's called Anne. But it doesn't work, and I know too why it doesn't work. So again, you see this insight as to why she has talked about these two Annes. I'm awfully scared that everyone who knows me, as I always am, will discover that I have another side, a finer and better side. I'm afraid they'll laugh at me, think I'm ridiculous and sentimental, not take me seriously. I'm used to not being taken seriously, but it's only the lighthearted Anne that's used to it and can bear it. The deeper Anne is too frail for it. Sometimes, if I really compel the good Anne to take the stage for a quarter an hour, she simply shrivels up as soon as she has to speak and lets Anne number one take over, and before I realize it, she has disappeared. So again, she's just basically talking about how there's two sides to her, and most people don't know that second side. Therefore, the nice Anne is never present in company, has not appeared one single time so far, but almost always predominates when we're alone. I know exactly how I'd like to be, how I am too, inside. But alas, I'm only like that for myself. And perhaps that's why, no, I'm sure it's the reason why I say I've got a happy nature within, and why other people think I've got a happy nature without. I am guarded by the pure Anne within, but outside I'm nothing but a frolicsome little goat who's broken loose. As I've already said, I never utter my real feelings about anything, and that's how I've acquired the name of chaser after boys, flirt, know-it-all, reader of love stories. The cheerful Anne laughs about it, gives cheeky answers, shrugs her shoulders indifferently, behaves as if she doesn't care. But oh dearie me, the quiet Anne's reactions are just the opposite. If I'm to be quite honest, then I must admit that it does hurt me, that I try terribly hard to change myself, but that I'm always fighting against the more powerful enemy. A voice sobs within me. There you are, that's what's become of you. You're uncharitable, you look supercilious and peevish. People dislike you, and all because you won't listen to the advice given you by your own better half. Oh, I would like to listen, but it doesn't work. If I'm a quiet and serious, everyone thinks it's a new comedy, and then I have to get out of it by turning it into a joke. Not to mention my own family, who are sure to think I'm ill, make me swallow pills for headaches and nerves, feel my neck and my head to see where I'm running a temperature, ask if I'm constipated, and criticize me for being in a bad mood. I can't keep that up. If I'm watched to that extent, I start getting snappy, then unhappy, and finally I twist my heart round again so that the bad is on the outside and the good is on the inside. And I keep trying to find a way of becoming what I would like to, so like to be, and what I could be if there weren't any other people living in the world. Yours, Anne. It's pretty poignant, the fact that this is her final entry, and she reveals quite a lot about herself there. Now we're going to take a look at the afterword. This is at the end of your text. It's the last several pages, and it will talk about what actually happens to Anne and the other annex residents. So Anne Frank's diary ends here. It is a work utterly complete in itself, and its eloquence requires no further comment. But the experiences Anne described become perhaps even more meaningful when seen in their immediate historical context. It is the purpose of this brief afterword to provide at least the outlines of that context and to bring Anne's own story to its conclusion. So this is where we actually hear what happened. So on August 4th, 1944, following information provided by a Dutch informer, the Gestapo, meaning the Nazis, penetrated into the Franks' hiding place. The 8 Jews, together with Mr. Kufius and Mr. Krahler, were taken to Gestapo headquarters in Amsterdam. After a few weeks' imprisonment, Mr. Kufius was released for medical care. Mr. Krahler spent eight months in a forced labor camp. The Franks, the Van Daan, and Mr. Dussel were sent to Westerbork, so that is a concentration camp. On September 3rd, the day of the Allies' capture Brussels, these 8 were among the last shipment of 1,000 Jews to leave Holland. So just how close Anne would have been to getting released. The prisoners were herded aboard a freight train, 75 people to a car. The cars, each with only a small barred window high on one side, were sealed. For 3 days and nights, the train wandered toward across Germany, often stopping, backing, detouring. On the 3rd night, it reached Auschwitz in Poland. That is one of the major concentration camps a lot of you have probably heard of. In the glare of searchlights, watched by black uniformed SS men tightly reining their police dogs, the Jews left the train. On the platform, men and women were separated. It was the last Otto Frank saw of his family. At Auschwitz, the healthier prisoners, their heads shaved, worked 12 hours a day, digging sod, driven relentlessly by the sadistic kapos, criminals who served the SS as labor overseers. At night, they were locked into crowded barracks. Outside the windows, they could see the sky glow red above the crematories. Through the research of Ernst Schnabel, a German writer whose book Anne Frank, A Portrait in Courage, was published in 1958, some of the events of the last few months of Anne's life have to be reconstructed. Auschwitz, a former inmate, told Mr. Schnabel, was a fantastically well-organized, spick and span hell. The food was bad, but it was distributed regularly. We kept our barracks so clean that you could have eaten off the floor. Anyone who died in the barracks was taken away first thing in the morning. Anyone who fell ill disappeared also. Those who were gassed did not scream. They were just no longer there. The crematory smoked, but we received our rations and had roll call. The SS harassed us at roll call and kept guard with machine guns from watchtowers, and the camp fences were charged with a high-tension electricity, so we could wash every day and sometimes even take showers. If you could forget the gas chambers, you could manage to live. The prisoners moved like sleepwalkers, half dead, protected somehow from seeing anything, from feeling anything. But Anne had no such protection, another survivor recalled. I can still see her standing at the door and looking down the camp street as a herd of naked gypsy girls was driven by to the crematory. And Anne watched them go and cried. And she cried also when we marched past the Hungarian children who had already been waiting half a day in the rain in front of the gas chambers because it was not yet their turn. And Anne nudged me and said, "Look, look, their eyes." In October 1944, Anne, Margot, and Mrs. Van Daan were among a group of the youngest and strongest women selected to be moved to Belsen in Germany. Left alone, refusing to eat, her mind wandering, Mrs. Frank, so Anne's mom, died in the infirmary barracks at Auschwitz on January 6, 1945. Otto Frank in the men's camp saw Mr. Van Daan taken off to be gassed. Mr. Dussel was sent back to Germany and died in the Neuengamme camp. When the SS abandoned Auschwitz in February 1945, to escape the advancing Russians, they took Peter Van Daan with them on the winter march to the west, where he was never heard from again. Otto Frank survived to be liberated by the Russians, so he ends up surviving. Belsen, Anne discovered, was different from Auschwitz, so Anne is now at this concentration camp called Belsen. There was no organization, no roll call, no food or water. Only the barren, frozen heath and the starving people looking like ghosts. By January 1945, the Allies had reached the Rhine, but at Belsen, typhus raged and hope was dead. At Belsen, Anne found her school friend, Live Goossens. Remember, Anne talks about lies in her diary. Remember, she was upset and was feeling guilty at the fact that she wasn't sure what happened to Live. So she ends up actually seeing her at Belsen. I waited, shivering in the darkness, Live related of the night when Anne was brought to her. It took a long time, but suddenly I heard a voice. Live, Live, where are you? It was Anne, and I ran in the direction of the voice, and then I saw her beyond the barbed wire. She was in rags. I saw her emaciated, sunken face in the darkness. Her eyes were very large. We cried and cried, for now there was only the barbed wire between us, nothing more, and no longer any difference in our fate. I told Anne that my mother had died and my father was dying. and Anne told me that she knew nothing about her father, but that her mother had stayed behind in Auschwitz. Only Margot was still with her, but she was already very sick. They had met up with Mrs. Van Daan again, only after their arrival here in Belsen. Mrs. Van Daan died at Belsen, but no witness marked the date. Margot died at the end of February or beginning of March 1945. Anne, who was already sick at the time, recalled a survivor, was not informed of her sister's death, but after a few days she sensed it. And soon afterwards she died peacefully, feeling that nothing bad was happening to her. She was not yet 16. In May 1945, the war ended. Months later, Otto Frank returned to Amsterdam by way of Odessa and Marseille. So Otto Frank does survive. So here's the checkpoint question 4. So what ends up happening to Anne? A, Anne was freed from the concentration camp. B, Anne died at Belsen, a concentration camp. C, Anne died after she was freed from the concentration camp. Go ahead, answer this question in the LAC1 course under the daily checkpoint, and this is question 4. Miep and Ellie gave him the notebooks and papers in Anne's handwriting that they had found strewn over the floor of the secret annex after the Gestapo had gone. These were Anne's diary, stories, and sketches. They were all that remained. Okay, so Otto received Anne's papers, her diary, her sketches from Miep and Ellie. This is a checkpoint question. At first, Otto Frank had copies of the diary privately circulated as a memorial to his family. It was a Dutch university professor who urged the formal publication of the book, and with only slight excisions by Mr. Frank, was published in Amsterdam by Contact Publishers in June 1947. The book soon went to several editions. In 1950, it was published in Germany by the Heidelberg firm of Lambert Schneider. The first printing was only 4,500 copies, and many booksellers were actually afraid to show it in their windows. But the book caught on rapidly, and the sales of the pocket edition, published by S. Fischer Verlag, totaled 900,000. In 1950, the diary was published in France, in 1952 in England, and the United States under the title Anne Frank, The Diary of a Young Girl. Now, 20 years after its original publication, the book has been translated into 31 languages, including Bengali, Slovene, and Esperanto. It has been published in 30 countries and has sold more than 1 million copies in hardcover alone. In the United States, the diary and the works of Anne Frank, both published by Doubleday and Company, had sold well over 150,000 copies. And the pocketbook edition of the diary has sold almost 4 million copies. The diary was also distributed by the Teenage Book Club and the Bookfind Club, which was reprinted in the Modern Library. It was serialized by an American newspaper syndicate with an estimated audience of 10 million readers. And millions more read it when it was condensed in Omnibook and compact magazines. A German translation of the book has been used in the United States as a school reader, and a large type edition has been published by Franklin Watts. So you can see that the popularity of this diary, just how many people have read this. And just keep in mind, for the actual checkpoint question, Miep and Ellie are the ones that did give Otto Frank the Anne's diary. They were the ones that found it. So true or false? Checkpoint question 5, this is your last checkpoint question. Otto obtained Anne's diary from Miep and Ellie. True or false? Anne Frank's wish, "I want to go on living even after my death," has come true. Today, the Anne Frank Foundation maintains the building on the Prinskat Canal where the Franks hid for 25 months as a memorial to Anne Frank. Each year, the house is visited by thousands of people from all over the world. The foundation is also working toward the future by helping to promote better understanding among young people from every part of the world. To this end, it has established the International Youth Center, which serves as a meeting place for young people and which holds lectures, discussions, and conferences covering a wide range of international problems. The Montessori School in Amsterdam is now the Anne Frank School. There are other memorials to her in Germany, Israel, and elsewhere to atone for the unmarked grave at Belsen. But above all, the diary remains. Her voice was preserved, Ernst Schnabel wrote. Out of the millions that were silenced, this voice no longer than a child's whisper. It has outlasted the shouts of the murderers and has soared above the voices of time. So that is concluding the Diary of Anne Frank, the final guided reading for this text. Make sure you complete the checkpoint questions. These are the 5 questions that you should see in the LAC1 course. And once you are finished, just let your teacher know that you